Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Serapio. Well, we begin this evening with some breaking news as Donald Trump unveiled his plan to apply tariffs to foreign-made vehicles, slapping 25% on cars and trucks made outside of the United States. Take a listen to what we heard from Trump himself.
And what we're going to be doing is a 25% tariff on all cars that are not made in the United States. If they're made in the United States, there's absolutely no tariff. We start off with a 2.5% base, which is what we were at, and we go to 25%. And basically, as you know, and as you've been seeing, not reporting as accurately as it should be reported because it's a massive story. Business is coming back to the United States so that they don't have to pay tariffs.
So that was Donald Trump from just about an hour ago. And to talk about this, we're now reaching out to Brian Kingston. He is the president and the chief executive officer for the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association. Brian, thank you for joining us. Now, as I said, this is obviously some late-breaking news for us as we go into the program this evening. But hearing what you've just heard from the U.S. president, what will the impact of this decision be on the Canadian industry?
Well, this is deeply concerning. If you look at the Canadian automotive industry, it has developed and been designed on the basis of an integrated North American supply chain. And what I mean by that is that parts and components move back and forth across the border numerous times, and the overwhelming majority of finished vehicles that are built in Canada end up in the United States. So if a tariff is in force of upwards, it sounds as though this tariff is actually going to be applied on top of the existing U.S. tariffs. So you'd be looking at about 27.5% on vehicles and 50% on trucks. It makes it very challenging to send product from Canada into the United States, and that's significant because this industry drives the Canadian economy with hundreds of thousands of people employed, and it's our second largest goods export.
Well, and it will also have an impact in the future. I'm going to read to you this statement. This is from Candice Lang. She's the president and the CEO of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. I know you probably know her. And this is the statement she released not that long ago. She says, quote, "The consequences of today's escalation in this destructive tariff war will not be contained to Canada as much as the U.S. administration would like to pretend. Throwing away tens of thousands of jobs on both sides of the border will mean giving up North America's auto leadership role, instead encouraging companies to build and hire anywhere else but here. This tax hike puts plants and workers at risk for generations, if not forever." What's your reaction to that assessment from Candice Lang?
Well, look, I don't disagree with a lot of what she has said. You know, it almost feels as though we need a painful reminder of why protectionism doesn't work. If the U.S. is going to ultimately move forward with these tariffs and reduce the amount of imports into the market, I do expect that other global partners will retaliate. And so as a result, the automotive manufacturing industry based in the United States will lose access to markets around the world, all in an effort to protect the U.S. market. That is not good economic policy. That means that you will have costs going up, production going down, less vehicles being sold, and everybody is worse off. So that's unfortunately where these protectionist policies will ultimately take us. And that's why, frankly, I do remain an optimist. And, I just believe this is so bad economically for the U.S. that it ultimately cannot sustain.
Although, Donald Trump makes the argument that what he's trying to do with these tariffs is bring all auto manufacturing to the United States. In the statement he made this evening or late this afternoon, he outlined examples of where that's already happening. Will these tariffs actually accomplish what Donald Trump is aiming to do?
Well, look, there's no doubt that when you put in place big trade barriers like this, particularly on goods, you do encourage more of that activity to occur inside the tariff wall. Where the argument doesn't quite work out, though, is that manufacturers don't just build in the U.S. for the U.S. market, they export. And that's what makes them successful. And so if you look at the U.S. manufacturing industry for automotive, the U.S. sends more vehicles to Canada than it does to China, Mexico, and Germany combined. We are an important market with nearly 2 million vehicles sold in Canada every year. And you can look at markets around the world where you see U.S.-built products. So my concern here is that you put in place this big tariff wall, you isolate the U.S. economy from the rest of the world because other countries will try and reduce imports of U.S. vehicles in retaliation. The net result, we're all worse off. The economy shrinks, and that is the lesson that we've learned from past bouts of protectionism. So it may feel good in the short term, but I can assure you, long term, these policies are a loser for all involved.
Well, in terms of immediate impact, you know, I hear what you're saying, but that's going to take some time, perhaps take some time to convince the U.S. administration. But in terms of the impact here at home, what are we talking in terms of dollars, in terms of jobs, and people's livelihoods?
Yeah, so the automotive industry is a big contributor to the Canadian economy, about $18 billion in GDP, over 130,000 direct jobs in automotive manufacturing. It sounds as though there is going to be effectively an exemption for U.S. parts in vehicles that are produced outside of the United States and make their way back into the U.S. market. We'll have to see how that plays out because, of course, in Canada, because of our high levels of integration with the United States, a Canadian-produced vehicle has very, very high levels of U.S. content in it. So we'll have to work through that and determine how significant the tariff will be for U.S. manufactured vehicles. I also do still think that there is an opportunity to work with the Americans on renegotiating our trade agreement. I mean, we just went through this process 4 years ago to put in place the USMCA, so there has to be a pathway to ensuring that we continue with open borders and markets in North America. That said, given how dependent we are on the United States, if these tariffs go forward, there are no opportunities to reduce them. It will have an impact on manufacturing in Canada because we simply don't have an opportunity to sell vehicles to other markets. This is all about sending product to the States.
Mm-hmm. Now, this does not actually go into effect until April the 2nd. You know, when we got word this afternoon that this tariff announcement was going to come down the pipes, there was this question as to whether or not they would be immediate. It looks like it's actually not going to be in effect until April the 2nd. What does that mean for you and the work that you see that needs to be done between now and then? Because we're only talking about a few days here.
Well, I think you'll see a couple things. I mean, first of all, from a political perspective, very important, of course, to try and continue to work with the Americans and make the case for our trade agreement and the importance of the North American market. So that's priority number one. Number two, though, I think you will see auto manufacturers trying to get as much product into the United States as possible. The U.S. doesn't have the capacity right now to build enough vehicles to satisfy demand. There's capacity in the U.S. to build about 10 million vehicles, and they sell about 16 million annually. So you could expect huge market disruptions in the United States as inventories decline and people just don't get product. And so that means prices are going up. And we keep reminding folks that tariffs are taxes. That's what they are. They're not paid by foreign countries. They're going to be paid by the American people. So I think you're going to see some interesting market dynamics over the next couple of days as people try and adjust to this.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I'm wondering what you're hearing from American auto manufacturers on this one, because obviously it's an integrated system as it is right now. What are you hearing from the Americans?
Look, at the end of the day, we just want to make sure that North America is competitive as a global auto manufacturing jurisdiction. And there's a lot of competition out there right now, particularly as the industry transforms to electrification. China in particular is going to have enough capacity by the end of this decade to satisfy anywhere between 75 and 80% of global vehicle demand from one country. So that is a real threat that we have to be concerned about. And it's very difficult to compete with a juggernaut of that size if we're doing so on the basis of 3 separate markets in North America with massive tariff barriers in place. So the competitiveness of this industry has been founded on integration. If we're going to succeed into the future, particularly into electrification, where Canada has all of those minerals that are necessary for next generation batteries, we've got to be working together and pulling in the same direction. So that's what I'm hearing, and I do hope that there's a path forward for the North American market.
Okay, well, Brian Kingston, we will speak again. Thank you for this evening.
Thanks so much.